"No, Jesse, you don't get to define who we are." The words thundered through the air, slicing through the smug grin on Jesse Waters' face as every camera in the studio froze. Zohran Mamdani wasn't yelling. His voice was calm, measured, but it carried the weight of generations. Silence settled over the set like fog rolling in. Even the sound technician, who usually scrolled through his phone behind the monitors, was holding his breath. So how did it get to this? How did a late-night panel on immigration turn into one of the most talked-about confrontations in recent American media? What did Jesse say that made Mamdani snap? Not in anger, but with a truth so sharp it drew blood. And why did half the internet call it the moment politics felt real again? It started, ironically, in a place designed for performance. A sleek, glass-walled studio in Midtown Manhattan, decorated with American flags, LED lights, and more cameras than a Hollywood film set. This was The Forum, a televised roundtable show known for its explosive segments and culture clash debates. The night's theme was immigration and national identity. Jesse Waters was there as the poster child of the right-wing view. Witty, quick, and smirking like he already knew he'd win. His fans didn't tune in to see him argue. They came to see him mock. The producers expected a spicy exchange. They got a detonation. Zohran Mamdani was invited as the progressive voice. State Assemblyman, son of Ugandan Indian immigrants, rapper turned politician, the kind of guest who'd add diversity, maybe even lose graciously. What no one expected was that he came in not to play a part, but to rip the script. The opening minutes were predictable. Jesse tossed out half-baked jokes about border invasions, laughed about English not being the main language in parts of Queens. Zohran answered with facts, numbers, stories. But the moment cracked when Jesse smirked and said, "You people always want to rewrite the rules but never want to be part of the team." The phrase hung there. You people. There was a pause. Zohran leaned forward. "Say that again." Jesse blinked. "I said you people. You know, the woke left, the immigrants, the activists who—" "You mean people like me?" Zohran asked, still calm. Jesse laughed. "Hey, if the shoe fits." That's when it began. Not a shouting match, not a fist on the table, just a voice steady enough to shake glass. "No, Jesse, you don't get to define who we are. You don't get to talk about team when you spent your career mocking our lives from the sidelines. You sit behind a desk, wear a flag on your lapel, and tell working-class immigrants they're not American enough. My mother worked 12-hour shifts in a hospital and never once questioned her place here. You call that un-American?" The room was dead silent. Maybe it's not the people coming in who threaten the country. Maybe it's the ones already sitting on power, deciding who belongs. That clip alone would go viral within hours, but it wasn't even the peak. Because Jesse, stung by the backlash, would come back harder. And Zohran? He wouldn't just defend himself. He'd expose an entire system in real time, using Jesse's own words as the rope. If you're still here, think about this. Have you ever watched a political debate and felt like someone finally said what needed to be said? Have you ever wondered what it looks like when truth speaks louder than smugness? Stick around. And by the way, if stories like this make you think deeper, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's next. The studio lights hadn't dimmed. The air conditioning still hummed. But something in the room had shifted, as if the usual rules didn't apply anymore. Jesse Waters, momentarily caught off guard by Zohran Mamdani's rebuke, tried to regain control. That smug smile crept back onto his face like a defense mechanism. "Well," Jesse chuckled, "we invited a poet, and we got a preacher. That's great. But maybe let's stick to the facts, not feelings. You people, progressives, love a good monologue." It was bait. Everyone watching knew it. Zohran didn't blink. "You want facts?" he said, now turning slightly toward the camera as if speaking to someone beyond the studio walls. Let's talk facts. Immigrants contribute more in taxes than they take in services. That's not poetry, Jesse. That's the Congressional Budget Office. Over half of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children. That's the American story, not the scare tactic you're selling nightly. Jesse interrupted. No one's scared of immigrants, Zohran. We're scared of chaos. We're scared of people who come here and don't assimilate, who bring their problems from broken countries and expect a warm welcome. The panelists squirmed. Producers in the control room exchanged looks. Someone mouthed, "Cut to commercial?" But the director shook his head. Ratings were spiking. They knew this wasn't just another segment. This was a cultural fault line breaking open live on air. Zohran's face didn't change, but his voice dropped an octave, calm, almost disappointed. You talk about broken countries, Jesse. My father fled Idi Amin's dictatorship. My mother was born in India, raised through poverty, and became a nurse in Queens. They came here because this country promised dignity. You think that's chaos? You think surviving is something to be ashamed of? He leaned in slightly. Let me ask you something, Jesse. What exactly have you survived? That hit like a slap. The panel went silent again. Jesse's expression hardened. He turned, now speaking to the audience like he always does when losing ground. This is the problem. The left romanticizes struggle. They think pain is a qualification. Newsflash, America isn't about pain. It's about greatness, and not everyone earns that. There it was. The line that would get clipped, tweeted, dissected. Not everyone earns that, Zohran repeated the phrase under his breath. Then louder. So, let me understand. My family, working, surviving, contributing, didn't earn it? But you, born in privilege, mocking from a desk, did? Jesse scoffed. I didn't say that. You implied it, Zohran replied. And that's the thing with people like you. You speak in winks and nudges. You don't say the word inferior, but you imply it. You don't say white, but you mean it. You've built a career on the edge of racism, just sanitized enough to pass prime time. The host flinched. One of the co-panelists muttered, "Damn." But Zohran wasn't finished. You said America's about greatness? I agree. But greatness isn't inherited. It's earned. And every janitor, every cook, every delivery driver from Bangladesh or Mexico or Ghana, they earn it every single day. You just never see them. Jesse leaned forward now, agitated. Oh, I see them. I just don't worship them like you do. And that was the final crack in the dam. Zohran stared straight ahead. You don't have to worship them. Just stop building your career on their backs. The segment ended on that note. No music, no outro, just dead air before the commercial cut. But it was already too late. Within 20 minutes, clips flooded social media. Zohran versus Jesse. The smackdown we didn't know we needed. Hashtags exploded. The YouTube channel saw its fastest comment spike in months. But what viewers didn't know yet was that the show's aftermath would spiral into something far beyond a viral moment. Jesse, wounded but prideful, wouldn't let it go. He'd go on a full offensive, using every tool in the media playbook. But what he didn't expect was that Zohran had receipts. If this kind of unapologetic truth hits you, take 2 seconds to hit subscribe. And drop a comment. Have you ever seen someone finally say what you were thinking but never dared to say out loud? By morning, the internet had crowned Zohran Mamdani a hero. But cable news wasn't ready to let him wear that crown without a fight. Jesse Waters opened his next segment with a smirk that looked more rehearsed than usual. The headline on the screen read, Mamdani Meltdown, When the Left Loses Control. Last night, Jesse began, we had a guest who confused righteous anger with righteousness, who thinks speaking louder makes you more correct. But don't worry, We've done some digging." He leaned forward with a mock conspiratorial grin. "Turns out Mr. Mamdani isn't as clean as he'd like you to believe." Then came the so-called investigation. A 5-minute segment filled with out-of-context clips, a few cherry-picked tweets from years ago, and a grainy image of Zohran at a protest, framed as evidence that he supported anti-police rhetoric and divisive ideologies. What Jesse didn't realize was that Zohran had expected this. Not because he was paranoid, but because he'd seen the playbook too many times before. You speak up, they try to smear you. You challenge their version of America, and they question if you even belong in it. But Zohran didn't flinch. He went live on Instagram that same night. No filters, no background music, just him, seated at his kitchen table in a t-shirt, with stacks of papers and a calm expression that said, "Let's get serious." "They want to paint me as radical," he said, voice low but steady. "So let's talk about what's actually radical in this country. Radical is working 2 jobs and still being unable to afford rent. Radical is calling someone un-American because they speak more than one language. Radical is thinking you can define patriotism without ever talking to the people who make this country run." He picked up a paper and held it up to the camera. "This is the full transcript from that protest photo they aired. You know what we were demanding? Better working conditions for delivery drivers in Queens. That's it. No violence, no anti-anything, just dignity." He held up another. "This? A tweet from 2016 about ending police brutality. If you think wanting people to survive traffic stops is controversial, maybe the controversy is you." The live broadcast clocked in at under 10 minutes, but it shattered records. Thousands of comments poured in. People reposted it with captions like, "This is how you respond to lies." Others wrote, "Finally, someone fighting back with receipts, not rage." The pressure flipped. Jesse's segment backfired. His network had to issue a quiet clarification the next day. Not quite an apology, but just enough to avoid legal backlash. "Zohran?" He didn't celebrate. He went back to work, scheduled a town hall, showed up to community meetings, took questions, listened, spoke, not just to fans, to critics too. And here's where it got real. 1 week after the confrontation, a woman stood up at one of Zohran's town halls. Middle-aged, white, Republican. The kind of voter no one expects to switch sides. "I'm not here to agree with everything you say," she began. "But I watched what happened, and I saw how they tried to twist it. And for the first time in a long time, I thought, maybe someone's finally being honest." The room was silent. Zohran nodded and simply replied, "Thank you." Because that was the point all along. Not to win arguments, but to crack something deeper. To show that speaking plainly, without performance, could cut through the noise. And yet, Jesse wasn't done. He wasn't used to losing, especially not to someone who wouldn't play the game his way. So he planned something bold. A live rematch, on his terms. And Zohran? He said yes. If you're still here, you probably feel it. That hum under your skin when something real is happening. If this story made you think, even for a second, don't forget to subscribe. And let us know in the comments. What do you think happens when the truth walks into a room full of cameras? They called it the rematch. A week after their now legendary showdown, Jesse Waters and Zohran Mamdani returned to the same studio, same table, same chairs. But the mood was different. This wasn't a panel anymore. It was a spectacle. Viewership doubled. The audience was buzzing before the cameras even rolled. Jesse's producers smelled blood. They thought they'd corner Zohran with aggressive fact-checkers, gotcha questions, maybe even force a viral stumble. But Zohran didn't come for redemption. He came for clarity. "Welcome back," Jesse opened, forced smile in place. "I hope we can keep things civil this time." Zohran smiled politely. "Civility isn't the issue, Jesse. Honesty is. And just like that, the temperature dropped. The first 20 minutes were tense. Jesse threw out stats from conservative think tanks, anecdotes meant to scare suburban viewers, and phrases like border collapse, American culture under attack, woke radicalism. He talked fast, hoping to rattle. But Zohran didn't interrupt. He waited, listened, and then, in a moment that would define the entire broadcast, leaned forward and asked, "Do you know your studio's janitor's name, Jesse?" Jesse blinked. "Excuse me?" "The man who cleans this room every night. Do you know his name?" Silence. "Because I do," Zohran continued. "His name is Miguel. He's from Puebla, Mexico. Been working in this building for 11 years. Sends half his paycheck home so his daughter can go to school. Never late, never missed a shift, never asked for a handout. That's who I'm fighting for." The camera didn't cut. Jesse shifted in his seat. "You sit here," Zohran added, "talking about invasions. I sit here thinking about Miguel and wondering how he became the enemy in your story." Jesse tried to pivot. "Look, I'm not saying every immigrant is bad." "No," Zohran cut in. "You're just saying they're a threat, a burden, a problem. You hide behind language, but the message is clear, and it's been clear for decades." Jesse fired back, agitated now. "So what? I'm not allowed to care about American culture? About law and order?" Zohran paused. "You are. But when you talk about culture, you mean control. And when you talk about law, you mean selective order. You never ask why the system fails working people. You only ask who to blame." And that's when it happened. Zohran pulled out a stack of manila folders. "You wanted a rematch, Jesse. Let's talk records." He opened the first folder, old video clips of Jesse mocking immigrants on live TV, calling them illegals, implying they were dirty, lazy, dangerous. He played them on a tablet for the cameras, unedited, no voiceover, just Jesse's own words. "This," Zohran said, "isn't satire, it's propaganda." Then he opened another folder, campaign donations. "This is where your paycheck comes from. Real estate lobbyists, private prison investors, groups that profit when people like Miguel are criminalized and deported." Jesse snapped. "You're crossing a line." "No," Zohran said. "You crossed it years ago. I'm just holding up a mirror." At that point, the show wasn't a debate. It was a reckoning. And the audience? They weren't just clapping. They were crying, messaging, calling family, sharing clips before the segment was even over. Something cracked in real time. A wall of denial, a script people were tired of hearing. The final moment wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just Zohran standing, thanking the host and saying, "This country doesn't need louder voices. It needs better listeners." And then walking off set. No mic drop, no swagger, just purpose. The clip would be shared over 80 million times in the next 3 days. News outlets tried to frame it, spin it, diminish it. But they couldn't. Because it wasn't about a party, or a soundbite, or even Jesse. It was about Miguel. About all the Miguels. About truth. Spoken without fear. If you've ever watched someone speak and felt like they were finally telling your story, then don't scroll past. Subscribe and leave a comment. What story do you think still needs to be told?